Hello, this is Dr. Gerhauser with naturalfoodsdiet.org. And if you've been following along, this is the second in a three-part webinar that will reveal the best way to achieve optimal health and vitality that I've been able to find in 30 years of searching in medicine and in alternative medicine. Now, in our last video, we were discussing root causes for the current chronic disease epidemic. The first one we talked about was the toxic healthcare system that we have in place and how, by some analyses, this is actually the leading cause of death. So if our healthcare system is one of the main root causes of our chronic disease epidemic, then industrial agriculture and food processing has to be equally, if not more, devastating to our health. The nutrient-poor diet is a result of modern farming practices, food processing, genetic modification, and the onslaught of diets filled with empty calories and toxins from junk food and damaged food and beverages. Big agribusiness has looked for and found ways to reduce the cost of food production. One of the big developments was the use of chemical fertilizers that are derived from petrochemicals. To find a better way to fertilize crops, scientists extracted various minerals and elements out of manure until they discovered the bare minimum requirements that will make plants grow. And that was NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And this worked. If a farmer added these elements to the soil, the plants will grow. This allows the fertilization process to cost much less. And it's less time consuming compared to natural fertilizers like manure or letting nature replenish the soil by leaving it fallow. The problem is that plant physiology is far less complex than in animals. There are many minerals and other nutritional factors that are necessary for optimal health in animals. So after 3 or 4 seasons of crops that are grown on a plot of land using NPK, most of the other minerals are depleted or absent from the soil, and you get crops with poor nutritional value. Big agribusiness has the goal of making fertilizers cheap to maximize profits and to make the crop look good so it will sell. Now, it doesn't matter that people may not be as healthy or that the low cost pushes farmers that take the time and expense to replenish the soil, well, it pushes them out of business. In fact, the art of destroying the competition is the ultimate strategy for many giant corporations to secure their markets. Now, of course, depleted soils and chemical fertilizers are just the beginning of the assault on our health from agribusiness. There's toxic pesticides and herbicides. They're in most fruits, greens, and vegetables. Intensive hybridization and genetic engineering gives us Franken plants for food that may be further assaulted by sterilization with irradiation. The life is further processed out of the food with the addition of artificial flavors and preservatives and a laundry list of other chemicals that inundate the processed foods and that make up the empty calories of the Western diet. So what are some of the other causes of chronic diseases? Well, the next cause is the relentless exposure to toxic chemicals and heavy metals. A study found that the cord blood of newborn infants contained 287 known toxins. I mean, this is definitely a bad start, especially when you consider that the mother bestows her mineral deficiencies to her baby as well. Now, in today's world, we're all born with toxins and deficiencies. Now, the next main cause of fatigue and disease are hidden infections. These have become universal, and this is because of the damage to our immune system from our poor diet and toxins. The best way to deal with infections is to strengthen your innate, incredible immune system. Antibiotics are becoming less and less effective as resistance to drugs spread. I believe the human population is relentlessly headed toward mass die-offs from antibiotic-resistant pathogens and from toxic human bodies. Now, another big cause is stress. In today's world, there's multitudes of stressors that we all have to face every single day. The reaction to stress, which is the fight or flight response, is actually inappropriate for mental stressors that aren't resolved. Mainstream medicine ignores this factor, as do most other diets and health programs. So let's discuss a few of these chronic diseases. First, there's the epidemic of obesity, where 2/3 of the population now in most Western nations are overweight or obese. The Surgeon General of the United States claims that 300,000 people a year will die from illnesses related to overweight and obesity. Obesity rates in children have gone up significantly in the past 15 years. And again, the Surgeon General has said that we now have the first generation in America where the kids face a shorter lifespan than their parents. Diabetes is a direct consequence of the obesity and poor nutrition that's present in our society, and the incidence is increasing dramatically. Even in children now, it's not unusual to have type 2 or adult onset diabetes. Diabetes is the leading cause of kidney failure requiring dialysis, amputation of limbs, and blindness. The misery inflicted by this one disease on our population is truly unfathomable. Now, cancer, it's become the biggest cause of death in the world, killing approximately 8 million people each year. And that's estimated to increase to 13 million deaths per year within the next 7 years. In 2012, the World Oncology Forum made its conclusions public about modern cancer treatment and research. Now, this is a mainstream medical panel, and it declared that large clinical trials chase ever smaller and smaller statistical significance. Treatments are approved, but they have very little clinical effect. They made the bold statement that the studies are designed to increase the value of the pharmaceutical company's shareholders, but have made very little overall progress in cancer treatments. Well, prevention is the key for winning the war on cancer. Unfortunately, cancer prevention is completely ignored by most big cancer-related organizations. The cancer industry is an entrenched business that's doing well with the present system in place. Now, arthritis is a crippling degenerative disease that affects a majority of aging adults in Western cultures. The need for joint replacement surgery is climbing so fast that there's not enough resources to do the needed operations unless we shift the entire economy over to healthcare. Now, according to a 2012 report in the Journal of the American Medical Association, there are now 600,000 knee replacements done each year, costing $9 billion. And that's just for knee surgeries. And there's projected to be 4 million procedures a year by 2030. And this would cost $6 billion a year in today's dollars. Now, when we add in all the other joints that we replace nowadays, this is truly staggering. Autoimmune diseases are also on the rise. This is where the body's immune system turns on itself, and it can damage tissues in the body, including your organs, nervous system, and joints. Now, the medical system sees big profit here. They develop drugs that can actually cost thousands of dollars per dose. Never mind that the side effects include increased risk of infections and cancer. But hey, more healthcare dollars spent to make the drug companies richer. Brain disorders like Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease are on the rise. Mainstream medicine's answer: develop more drugs. But the most effective approach is for prevention by addressing the causes. Now, I could go on and on for hours about all the evidence that we are losing the war on chronic disease. Now, let me tell you, with my background and experience, you might think that, hey, he would be a good physician to go to if I had a health problem. I was at one of the leading institutions in the world for integrative medicine. And there, I would say we did a good job, especially compared to the traditional allopathic doctor that was limited to drugs and procedures. But there we were still stuck in the same paradigm, where we would recognize a constellation of symptoms to make a diagnosis. We'd then apply a remedy. Then we would reevaluate the diagnosis, and then we would apply a new remedy, etc., etc., etc. Now, over my career, thousands of patients came to me with their main complaint or chief complaint of fatigue or low energy. Now, the allopathic doctor may run some tests, like to see if your thyroid function is low, or maybe find out that a person is anemic to find, a cause for the fatigue. But the blood tests are typically normal in this situation. So the doctor typically will do nothing, or worse, will prescribe a toxic drug for, say, oh, you have depression or anxiety or sleep. That's why you're complaining. And if they find on the test that you have an elevated cholesterol, or they measure your blood pressure and find it's elevated, the doctor's even more likely to prescribe another drug, which will lead to even more fatigue. Now, an integrative doctor, like I have been, might look further into the diet and lifestyle and maybe look for unusual sources of fatigue, like toxins or hidden infections. But the doctor's still basically stuck in the Western medical paradigm. Now, I told you earlier about the test that saved my life. Now, I'm so excited about my results in the program, and the program that I'm about to show you, and it's called nutritional balancing. And what I did is I immediately started testing my family, friends, and then patients. Now, for those that did the program, there was almost universal success. Now, I would discuss these tests that I did with my colleagues, and most were skeptical, and they would ask for the research to back it up. They were actually astounded that I would accept what helped me just based on my own anecdotal experience. But let me tell you a little background. Even before my fatigue and chest pain episode, I had ignored or was very skeptical of most modern medical research. When I left the clinic where I practiced about 6 years ago, I realized we helped a lot of people, but I also noticed that a majority didn't respond well to any treatment, whether it was conventional drugs, procedures, herbal treatments, nutritional supplements, and other alternative treatments. Now, I was also fascinated by the fad diets, like the Atkins diet, and programs such as the push for veganism that's been made popular again by the famous book, The China Study. Now, the proponents of these programs would quote study after study after study proving their point. Now, after examining these programs and going through the corroborating supporting evidence, it was very easy to come away with the feeling that the research backed the theory up. But can they all be right? And today you have the countless variations: paleo, vegan, low fat, high fat, wheat belly, fruitarian, gluten-free, dairy-free, etc., etc., etc. So the bottom line is, who's right? Now, soon after my distrust of medical research blossomed, I came across the work of a Dr. Yonitas. Now, he's a physician researcher out of Stanford University. Yonitas was a math prodigy, and he had a basic question when he was a young physician house officer in the hospital. He wondered whether most of the basic procedures and prescriptions that they were giving to patients were backed up by solid research. Now, he actually said that when he originally looked into this area, he was expecting to find that they were. But to his surprise, he found there was very poor documentation for benefit. And this led to a popular essay he wrote about how most medical research is actually wrong. Now, with the stir that this report engendered, he developed a team to look much more deeply into medical research. They actually had this team re-examine 228,000 different published trials. And at the end, they concluded that 90% of the published research was misleading or biased in some way, or just plain wrong. Now, if this is true, and very few people actually argue with Dr. Yonitas, but it appears that we can't trust any medical research at face value. So, what is the solution? Now, believe it or not, I actually like science, and I like how it can lead to the truth for figuring out the cause of a problem and to help find a solution. The problem is in modern day medicine and in the drug treatments, the truth is often discarded and the focus becomes one of funding, patents, and short-term profit. Now, I came to the foundation of my personal preventive medicine program from the work of one scientist, Weston Price. He was a dentist that practiced in the early 1900s, and he noticed that his patients were having more and more cavities as well as overall poor health. Now, he suspected a nutritional etiology, and being a scientist, he wanted to find evidence for the cause. He had noted that the changes in the diet brought about by the industrialization of the food supply, and he sought to find populations in the world that still ate a traditional diet. Now, this search took him to many tribes all over the world. Well, what he found is there was very few cavities and straight teeth in primitive tribes that were still eating their natural food. And this was even though they might have poor or even absent dental hygiene. Now, he was also able to document the onslaught of cavities after the introduction of modern foods to these populations. Then he analyzed the diets of the primitives and analyzed the differences compared to the modern diet. What he found was a lack of the fat-soluble vitamins, which he called activators, and lower overall nutrition, including lower mineral content in the modern diet. Then he went a step further and took children that had cavities and were eating modern foods and supplemented their diets with the missing factors. And what he actually documented a remarkable reversal of dental cavities. Now, this should have been the most important nutritional discovery of the 20th century. But his book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, has remained relatively obscure. Now, I used Dr. Price's information, and I have experienced many benefits from me, my own family, and many of my patients over the years. But going back to the food of our ancestors is difficult, if not impossible, today. Even if we could, the onslaught of toxins, poor farming techniques, and the continuing progression of food processing, it's led the average person into such a poor nutritional and toxic state that just switching to natural foods is not nearly enough. This is when I stumbled upon the work of another brilliant scientist clinician that was intrigued by determining a person's nutritional status through using hair mineral analysis. Dr. Eck spent his entire career studying health and disease and how it was reflected in the hair mineral ratios. Now, after 30 years of experimenting with treating patients, he developed a program to rebuild a person's health by using hair mineral ratios as a roadmap to follow. He found that the patients that had their mineral ratios corrected compared to those that already had good health, that when he corrected their ratios, conditions resolved, both physical and mental. Now, this unique discovery was carried on and refined by Dr. Wilson, who had worked with Dr. Eck. Now, what really convinced me on the value of this test is how it consistently pinpoints underlying issues that are missed by most other medical tests. I personally did my own hair analysis, and it pinpointed the cause of my fatigue, which was adrenal burnout caused by compulsive exercise and toxins. My body was stuck in a term called a calcium shell, where in a survival defense, the body calcifies soft tissues, including the hair. This was probably the cause of my chest pain. And I was certainly headed to one of the common marathoner heart attacks. Now, lucky for me, Dr. Eck spent over 30 years figuring out how to correct a calcium shell through diet, supplements, detoxification, and meditation. The uniqueness of Dr. Eck and Dr. Wilson's nutritional balancing is that it was developed by scientific methods. But, like most great discoveries, it looked at the problem from a different perspective. The nutritional balancing program integrates the fields of science and biology, but also traditional Oriental medical traditions of Ayurveda, macrobiotics, and reflexology, traditional naturopathy, metabolic typing, the supplementation of vitamins, minerals, herbs, glandulars, and digestive enzymes. It utilizes the wisdom of the body. It utilizes the agricultural sciences of mineral bioavailability. It uses systems theory and cybernetics, which is information science. In nutritional balancing, these fields are all synthesized and integrated in unique ways, so they work together in a beautiful and harmonious fashion. Okay, I think that's enough information for today. Please stay tuned for the final part of the story. And that is, what can this testing do for you? And how can you get access to all this information at no cost? This is Dr. G. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.